Hi everyone, in this tutorial I'm going to go through some of the basic of environment and shell variables. Right, to get you started, let's first take a look at how do you see what are the environment variables that is being specified. Right, you can do the command print env. This will give you what are the environment variables that are set by default by the system for your current login or your current shell. Right, so for my demo user environment, I have all these variables assigned, right? So usually, if you have not done anything or not changed anything, the print environment variables um, is actually used by all users, right? So whether you are using logging in as demo2, root, you should see all these standard sets of variables defined. Okay. Next, you can then look at the environment variables, right? Or the shell variables that is tied to the current shell by using the command set. Without keying any variables name, it will list down all the variables that are being set for this shell itself. So if I do a set, you can see that it's a very long list. So you do a set type less, it will give you page by page view. So I'll show you a nuance later, right? In the print environment, I do not have host name, right? But for the current shell environment, I have a host name. So I'll show you if you use print environment and if you use echo, you know what you will see as the output. Okay, you can go through this list by pressing space to go through page by page, or you can just press Q to exit out of it. Okay, so now that we know where to look for the global environment variables as well as the local shell variables, we can then go in and look for individual variables. So now for global variables, there are variables like users which are available both globally as well as for the local shell. So if I do a print environment user, I get demo. So echo usually is used if you want to see what are the variables assigned to this. So what are the value assigned to these variables, both from a shell environment or a um, from a global environment variables or shell variables. So if I do a echo user, I will see demo. Now, just now, if you have remember, I highlighted host name is only available in shell variables, right, with the set command. Now, if I try and print, oops, environment host name, I will not see any value, right? That's because I did not specify host name in the environment variables. Now, if I do a echo dollar followed by the variable name, I will see that the host name is Draco Cyber Linux. So these are some of the small nuances that to take note when you are setting variables. The other thing to take note is that by default, the system variables are usually in capital letter, right? So why do you need to take note of this is because if you are defining your own variables, in a lot of tutorial, they will recommend you set your own custom variables in lower caps. For me, I like to do it in both uppercase and lowercase, right? To make it a little bit more unique. But depends on how you set your variables, you can do what you prefer and or what is your naming convention. Okay, so now that we are done with the environment variables and shell variables, there is another command that you use if you have defined environment variables for projects. So for example, if I do an environment, it will define what is being set for your current environment. So if you are doing Python project, you might have defined a custom environment. By entering environment key, you will see additional environment variables that you have set, right? Since I've not done any custom project, I don't see any new variables that are being set. So by default, the environment variables will take the global variables that are being set for your environment. Okay, now let's then move on to setting variables. Now to set variables temporarily, which means that if I exit the session, right, the variables will be purged from your buffer or from your memory, right? I can do this by typing the variable that I want to assign. right? So I like to use the first part as capital letter and then the second part as small letter, uh, separated with a underscore, right? So I can do YouTube demo. Okay, so that is how you set the custom local shell variables. I just press enter. So now if I do an echo email address, I will see that there is a value set, right? However, because I've set it as a local shell variable, when I try and print environment email address, I will see that there is no value assigned. Okay, now to set a global environment variable, right? I can use the export function. But just to show you a difference, right? So I've set this email address as a local shell. So if I move on, right, and change to another user, oops, password is typed wrongly. Okay, and I tried to do echo dollar email. You can see that I will not be able to see any value. And if I do a print, I will not see any value, right? Because I've not set a global environment variable, so it doesn't apply to any other user. So it's unique to demo user only. So if I go back to demo users and I do a echo, I can see that the value is here. Now to make it global, right? So I'm going to export email address. Okay, do take note, right? If I do this, I will overwrite the value that is currently in the buffer or in the memory. So if I do a export email address, let's make it global. Okay, you don't do that most of the time, but just for tutorial, I'm gonna make a very long name, right? And then I'm gonna take it as global YouTube demo. Okay, if I set this, now if I do a echo dollar email address global, I'll see that. If I do a print, I'll see the value. Oops, apologies. When you print, you do not need the dollar sign. Okay, you can see that the value is assigned. Now, if I do a SU to demo2 again, and then I do a print environment, I will see that, right? And if I do an echo, I will also see that, right? So global environment variables gets cascaded down to the local shell variable. So some of the nuances that you need to take note. So this is the way to set temporary environment variables or shell variables, right? So to make it persistent, right now you need to know where are the variables stored, right? So for global variables is usually stored in this file /etc/environment. Now you need a root or privilege to access this file. So if I do a sudo cat, I can see that. Okay, so you can see that user defined by default, only path is being defined in the global environment variable. The rest are all system defined, right? So, but this is where you can add in and customize your global variable. So you might put in things like email addresses, but you most likely will not put in things like password API keys. Okay, so that's how and where you set your global environment variables. Now for local shell variables, especially for bash shell, you usually look at a couple of files, right? So if you do a list, you will see that by default, when you log in, right, the system will look for .profile followed by .bashrc, right, which is defined in dash in dot profile. So let's look at dot profile. You can see that, okay, this is a command interpreter for login shell. So when you log in, it will first interpret this file, right? And you can see that in this file, it will interpret that if home.bash rc is exists or is available, it will do a source, which is denoted by dot followed by the file itself. So for to add in any local shell variables and make it persistent, you want to edit this file, right? So we're gonna copy this file, okay, and then we're gonna look at it in depth. So do a nano. Okay, you can see all the various definition that variables that are defined. Your prompt variables is here. You can see that there is alias set for your commands to make it shorter, like ll that you see that I type. It's not actually a standard list command. It actually is a ls list followed by -al capital F, right? So it gives me all the file structure, the list, and hidden object. Okay. So to make the changes persistent, so what you want to do for the current shell, you want to do this by typing in the variable name equals to local, just the name, right? So local YouTube demo bash. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do. Control X, save, exit. Now, when you do any changes to the file, it doesn't get automatically reloaded, right? To show you the example is, if I do a echo $email address, which is what I have set, you can see that it's still the old YouTube demo username. Now to reload or load the file, right? Source or dot, right? So we're going to show you source followed by home followed by dot bash rc. Sorry, the user demo dot bash rc. Okay, so when I do that, it loads the settings and variables from the .bash rc file. Now, if I do a echo right now, you can see that this is changed to local YouTube demo bash at the email address. Okay, so that's how you set persistent. So the day so if I exit, log out of the session, come back in, you will automatically load these variables into my local shell, right? So those are the couple of nuances for setting local, global variables temporarily, and also making it persistent by adding the file. Now, if I want to change this and make it persistent for all users to use, I will go and edit the /etc/environment file itself. Okay, so that's all for this short tutorial. Hope it is useful for those of you who are, starting off with environment and shell variables. Hope this tutorial is useful for you. I'll do a little bit more interesting things in the next couple of tutorials, especially when we start to go into writing bash script. Right, so stay tuned, take care, and stay safe. Thank you.